All right, I greet you one more time. So, folks, welcome. As you can see, we are television active and on Enterprise TV, time to bring you Homo Politicus that interrogates issues thrown up by my country, your country. And today, Northern leaders warn about United States and French military bases in Nigeria. I'm Citizen Jones Hussein. Welcome. You know, a military base is what it simply is: a facility directly owned and operated by or for the military or one of its branches that shelters military equipment and personnel and facilitates training and operations. At the moment, the United States of America has 5 military bases in Africa, in Djibouti, Kenya, Niger, Egypt, and next door Cameroon. Now, these facilities are meant to foster joint operations against a common foe or enemy, or to protect its interest. But we understand that Northern leaders have warned President Bola Tinubu about the relocation of the US and French military bases from the Sahel to Nigeria. To them, an agreement in this regard might jeopardize our defense and security. Now, late American Commander General William Westmoreland said, quote, "Soldiers don't start wars, politicians do," end quote. Shall we have a conversation, please? My discussant this morning is the affable Cyril Abaku. Cyril is a broadcaster and a communications expert. Cyril, I greet you.
I greet you too.
The subject matter is not Greek to you.
It is not. It is not.
So you understand its dynamics.
Of course I do. Dynamics.
So let's go there.
Dynamics, implications, consequences, fallouts, possibilities, scenarios, and so on. It won't be the first time we would have such a substantive idea being pushed. If I recall well, in the Yaradua years, there was a similar proposition.
In fact, go back to the Obasanjo years.
Yes, it has always been. In fact, back then it was also Northern leaders that said this couldn't be. And I recall...
The idea was scratched?
Yes. I recall the AFRICOM, as they call it, back then, had been moved to Germany. I think Stuttgart or somewhere in Germany. The Africa Command was moved to Germany. In the Yaradua years, the story leaked. It was the leak that led to premature resistance. And so before the subject could even be substantively broached, it was dead on arrival. Now, under President Bola Tinubu, we're not sure why the matter is being resurrected right now. But if history is anything to go by, the cons or the disadvantages of having such a base in Nigeria far outweigh the blessings that may come with it.
Cyril, let me indulge you with a bit of history here. You know, after the unfortunate 9/11 incident, it took America 10 long years to bring down the supposed mastermind of that attack. But let's come to Africa. As we sit today, Nigeria is not sitting pretty, security-wise. We are surrounded by enemies.
And if we told ourselves the truth, why is the American base the solution, for example, for those who are holding that?
No, have you been told it's a solution? So you might as well ask, why do the Americans still maintain bases in Cameroon, Djibouti, Niger, Kenya, and Egypt?
Yes. And why, again, the bases in Niger, Mali, Burkina Faso, and all this, and the Sahel countries couldn't stop the jihadists from running roughshod over those countries? Even in Nigeria. Let's even put the matter in perspective. A base, an actual base, is in Niger, a neighboring country with Nigeria. which means that the US has its eyes and ears on the ground in Nigeria.
And its men.
And its men, if you like, in Nigeria. But let's even ask ourselves, why is it that the presence of them, in quote, if that English is to be allowed, the presence of them has not what can we count as any significant advantage or benefit in the war on Boko Haram or terrorism, as you know, in a broader context? I just personally believe that the reality is Nigeria has not even demonstrated its own willingness to beat back terrorism. That is true. Now, you saw the other day, so-called repentant Boko Haram people attacked a police barrack
in Maiduguri.
Now, the question to ask is, what was the yardstick for measuring such repentance? And what sort of program followed that repentance that was not enough to prevent them from...
Otherwise, you are reminding me, a terrorist is a terrorist is a terrorist.
Yeah, of course. Otherwise, the question again is, where in our law books is it written that if somebody showed remorse or repentance, and by what yardstick, the government will now designate such a person truly repentant and therefore should go and sin no more? Now that they've come back to sin, what do we now do? So that is on the one hand. On the other hand, the argument for the base could be this. Could be that Nigerians just after all go to US and other places for training from time to time. So if the base was in Nigeria, couldn't we take advantage of that? Okay? But in the end, the real strategic goal of that base can be Nigerians. It will be Americans. So why should we let that in the first place? Why can't we assert ourselves as a true sovereign power in determining the course of our destiny? Look, all the big...
But Cyril, has the presidency in Nigeria reacted to the reaction of the Northern elders?
No, well, because of course, this is like a barometer or a gauge. For me, I think that reacting to the Northern voices may be a very risky thing to do because it has more political implications than it has for any other one. I can tell you this president has run into too many headwinds with the North. Citizen Jones.
But the North gave him a substantial measure of the votes that brought him to power.
I'm glad you're saying gave him. The question is, will they give him again? Because I'm saying that this president
he is the president until 2027.
It's fine.
Except something untoward happen.
Of course. But I'm saying that untoward thing that could happen, it won't come from heaven. It is in the hands of men who have power to make choices. And now this president has had too many run-ins with northern leaders. Okay? From the senators to some governors and then to people in civil society and all kinds of groups. You and I were here last...
Cyril, I cited a quote credited to late General William Westmoreland. Soldiers don't start wars, politicians do.
I agree with you. And that is to the extent that it is politicians in Africa, in Nigeria and West Africa who are largely behind Boko Haram and largely behind terrorism. You know, I was reading an article on war this morning, and the writer was quoting the Nation newspaper of New York and said that newspaper said wars hide scandals. That's like saying wars hide the underbellies.
Wars or wars?
Wars.
Okay.
Wars hide scandals. Ever heard the story which was thrown up by the EU's, one of the EU's foreign ambassadors also? He said that it was Israel that founded Hamas as a counterweight to Fatah. Now the Fatah is as good as dead or something, right? And the same Hamas that was allegedly created by Israel, allegedly has apparently come back to haunt America. Who knows? It was also alleged that America propped up Osama bin Laden and created or funded whatever it was, the Al Qaeda, right?
Otherwise, America gave gave vent to the attack on the US?
Well, so this is how the conspiracy theory sort of comes back to haunt now. So, but I mean, I'm glad you even went there. This whole conspiracy in Nigeria today, people believe that Boko Haram has not ended because people in high place. Didn't the former president say that even in his cabinet there was Boko Haram? Were we not told that? A former chief of defense staff went as far as saying that it was fifth columnists, which means sympathizers within the ranks and board of government were the ones who are giving vent to Boko Haram. So when such a thing is going on, you would imagine that the foreign US base will be the solution. It will not be the solution. I think that the solution.
No, Cyril, there's a flip side to it. With a base here, insurgents would have a rethink.
They will have a rethink. They may not have a rethink.
Don't forget, America wanting a base in our country simply is to protect her interest.
Exactly. So the question will be, what are America's strategic interests in the north?
In Nigeria?
No.
Cyril, you have not been told that the Americans have picked a base in northern Nigeria. You have not been told that.
Well, this is the point, right? The strategic thing to do, back then, back under Yar'Adua, I think the base was supposed to be somewhere in the north central, actually. Not even in the northeast or northwest. But right now, looking at...
Well, North Central appears to favor the project because of military institutions in that belt.
Now, but again, you can't take away the influence of that on the north as a whole, generally. But you see, this matter is a bit more complex than we would like to look at it on the surface.
No, Cyril, you are without saying it, telling me that North-South politics is alive and well in Nigeria.
It may not be. But why?
Otherwise, the impression is created by you that leadership in Nigeria must defer to the North.
Okay, so, but I think that
no pun is intended.
No, of course I understand you. Because of course, right now it is the North that is speaking up, and they are doing so very directly, with determination, without prevarication. They are saying, Mr. President.
And for the sake of argument, isn't it right for even the neophyte analyst to conclude that Boko Haram perhaps was hatched somewhere in the north?
Well, we've had these stories time and again. It's not new. Sometimes when you listen
to dismiss the story.
Of course, because sometimes when you even hear their leaders speak, you wonder whether they understand the nuances of yes.
Names like Ndume, Mohammed Yusuf.
There are so many
southern names.
Of course, they are not. Yeah. And there are so many more of them who, I mean, even on social media, they're leading scholars. You hear the things they say, right? No less so that when the government of President Jonathan said they were willing to negotiate with Boko Haram, and what did we hear? We had Boko Haram nominate the then former head of state, General Muhammadu Buhari, to be the person to have the negotiations on their behalf. Have we forgotten the statement he himself made before he became president that an attack on Boko Haram was an attack on the north? So these sort of sympathies, when they exist, how do you then respond? What I want to see is a Nigerian.
Do you expect a region with such a mindset? Do you expect it not to flay a so-called American base in Nigeria?
I expect them to flay, but beyond flaying, I don't believe that force of arms alone would be enough.
No. The American establishing a base here will not be dependent on arms alone. Warfare in the 21st century I don't need to see the enemy to fire him or take a shot, take aim. intelligence and all that. So we will require that in a 21st century Nigeria.
Yes, but I believe that Nigeria on its own has the capacity to do all of that.
So why do why do our men go out to why are they seconded to on courses abroad?
So those are common practices all over the world. Even in Nigeria, people come to learn. I mean, the likes of Moritan Mohammed was trained in Ghana. He could have been trained in Nigeria. Other people from, I mean, sometimes it's choice.
And many of the so-called revolutionaries of January 15, 1966 had their training in England.
So yes, so of course you had
Ifa
Juna, Nzeogu, and the rest of them.
And General T.Y. Danjuma was trained at Sandals.
You can imagine that. So it's not far-fetched, right? All over the world, there are comparative
advantages
in those things. There are certain dimensions of warfare that Nigeria held its way in for a long time. Okay, leading ECOMOG, we did it by ourselves.
Serious, but you know that the propriety or otherwise of citing an American base here would not be determined by the commander-in-chief alone.
This is the reason why...
Expectedly.
Yes, because there's going to be the politics of it. And it is the reason why he needs to now consult widely. But even before consultation, he has been told. Critical stakeholders are now saying, Mr. President, this is not welcome.
The stakeholders must be from the north.
No, I'm saying that some of the stakeholders are now saying, Mr. President, our mouth not there for this one. Let him hear from people in Edo State, hear from other certain leaders, and then let him decide. But I can tell you that when the buy-in is not strong, then
buy-in from the north.
Well, this is not just a northern problem.
But that's the impression.
It's a Nigerian issue.
No, that's the impression you are
It's purely Nigeria. But well, the president has to understand that politics overrides everything else in our country. And if he wants to
of course, the viewer must understand that America has bases in 5 countries as we sit here, namely Djibouti, Egypt, Niger, Kenya, and next door Cameroon.
But the problem is this. Is it to Nigeria's own strategic advantage or America's? That's one. Number 2, why
America's?
So good.
America's essentially Cyril, because it is said the largest market in Africa is in Nigeria.
And then the question is, why is Nigeria so weak and unable to defend its own territory?
Well, Nigeria has so many fault lines.
No.
We cannot fix it on this show.
We cannot, but what we must do is to have leadership that begins to think Nigeria, work towards Nigeria, and achieve Nigeria.
And why not? Cyril, the producer, is asking us to wind down.
That's fine.
So in 30 seconds, can you do that?
The Nigerian president must wake up to the challenge of nation building. He must build consensus. He must work towards resolving the things that weaken our institutions and make Nigeria to work again. The Americans are our friends. They will be our friends any day. But why should we depend on our friends to solve our basic problems? Why can't we rise up on our own to the challenge of asserting our identity and our sovereignty, solving our problems? That, I think, is what we should do over and above anything else.
And in closing, the last in 30 seconds, let me do this. If Americans are our friends, what's wrong with depending on a dependable friend like America? Again, the northern politicians, northern leaders do not have the final say here. The National Assembly does. And the National Assembly is made up of politicians from around the country. Nigeria, like Israel, is surrounded by enemies. And yes, as my discussant is saying, Nigeria can't afford to sleep with 2 eyes closed. Perhaps we are in that season that tries men's souls. I expect ours here is to mold opinion and allow decision makers to take heed. Let me thank Cyril Abaku for another session. Thank you.
My pleasure.
And from me, Citizen Jones, until the next time, it's take care. Bless you. Bye-bye now. Enterprise TV, a tradition of truth.